Welcome everybody to what is our fourth webinar of 2021. Subject of today's webinar is reliability, the alignment of maintenance and operations. And the title, to be honest, does not do the detail and the information in this webinar true justice. It covers a much greater span. Michael Gill will be presenting this. Michael's the partner for the reliability, asset management, and risk assessment and management in Helios Consulting. What can I say about Michael? Gosh, he has 22 years of experience. I've known him for close to 12 years now, I think it is. He's probably one of the most knowledgeable maintenance and reliability experts that I've ever had the pleasure of actually working with. And when we were starting Helios Consulting, he was definitely on my list of people that I wanted to bring into this company. He not only does he cover asset management and reliability, he has in-depth knowledge of risk management, and he's also stepped back from taking his Master of Arts in psychology and in his practicum, and he's decided to spend time working with us to help the industry get better at reliability and maintenance management.
Well, thank you for that introduction, Mike. I appreciate it, and I'm very happy to be working with you at Helios Consulting. I think we've got a really good group of people there. For today's presentation, I wanted to kind of talk to things in terms of idealism, perception, culture, and how that basically will help us turn it into a robust approach. So if we start off with, idealism around reliability, I mean, a lot of people have really good ideas that they bring to the organization, especially when it comes to reliability. And I guess the best way to talk about, a perfect solution is to first understand or get an idea of what the concept of reliability is meant to do. And this definition that is up on the screen right now is one that's, it's been drawn from Google and John Mowbray's Blue Book, and it's just a variety of different areas. But anyways, reliability is considered to be the probability that an asset, system, or service will perform its intended function for a specific period of time and will operate in a well-defined environment without failure. So I would say that if we could achieve that based on, that period of time, the parameters that we put on it, if we were able to achieve that without failure, we're getting pretty close to a successful or perfect solution, right? But I wanted to add to that a little bit more. If we were to consider, some increases in efficiency, improved productivity, improved availability, and a reduction in cost, that makes it even more perfect. So when we ask that question, what does the perfect operations, maintenance, and reliability organization look like? There's some assumptions that we need to, kind of clear up. Assumptions and considerations. For example, the one assumption that we make all the time is we think perfect is uptime, is having uptime, constant uptime, right? There are different standards for different industries. So we have to consider that these different standards can impact how we approach reliability. And for example, I mean, the nuclear industry is a lot different from the forest industry. There's higher standards, right? Another consideration that I've actually dealt with is where your home base, the organizational home base might be, can definitely change or influence how organizations view reliability. Right? There may not be the same standards where the home base is. If we determine what perfection looks like, should we then strive for this perfection? I think we should. I think striving for perfection is a good thing. But we need to understand the organization that we're working in. We need to take a look into all the things that influence immediate success. And then recognizing we should never let perfect stand in the way of good as we take our journey. That's one of the things I always like to say. And things that can influence us is, we want to strive and we want to get the best right away, for a quick turnaround, and that's not always the best approach. So we should never let perfect stand in the way of good. Good is the stepping stone, maybe, to get us to that perfect reliability implementation or reliability program. And when I think of some of the things that can influence us, again, is the mindset that organizations have. And many of you would have experienced this in some way or another. I mean, there's the mindset to maximize production and profit as well, and maximize asset life. And when you consider those three things, you need reliability. And then there's the mindset of run it hard and replace it when needed. And in that case, there really isn't that much consideration for reliability. We may need to take small steps as opposed to the large strides. So achieving good is not a bad thing as we strive for perfection. So let's consider first some of the main factors of success. And the first thing I'm going to say is, in organizations that I've worked with before, it can take up to 6 years to get a reliability program actively functioning and actively working. But in order to get it there are things like good leadership that need to be in place. There should be, a long-term reliability vision that is integrated with the corporate strategy. Continuous improvement is a big piece, because if you're going to put something like this in place, then we need to ensure that, we're building on it and making it better. A focused planning and scheduling piece is huge. In my experiences, I've always found there's a major bottleneck with planning and scheduling, and it's primarily it's things just fall out of schedule or get behind, or new things come in and replace things. And if we don't have a solid foundation for planning and scheduling, it's going to be difficult to integrate new ideas and concepts into your organization. So I'm talking fundamentally here. And then well-defined preventative maintenance and condition monitoring. So what I mean by that is that's kind of a baseline, I think, for starting this. We should be doing this stuff already, even if we don't consider our organization to have a very robust reliability piece. These are some of the fundamental things. So if we look at how we're going to attack this today, some of the things we want to keep in mind is idealism. And what we mean by that is, consider where your organization is in maturity. Consider where your organization is with capacity and capability. And really important, how your organization prioritizes. And, not only prioritization, but risk management is a big piece. And one of the things that we said at the top of this presentation was we're going to look at the different perceptions that are typically heard, as we've worked through this in the past. I've heard a lot of things from operations, and I've heard a lot of things from maintenance. And just recently in my career, I want to say in 2011, I started to recognize just how important organizational culture is. How well does your organization react to change, and how good is your change leadership? Now, I'm certainly not the expert in that area, but it is certainly something that I think we at Helios like to bring in to all of our solutions when we're dealing with change and people. But all these things that I just mentioned are what we want to base our approach on, okay? Trying to achieve perfection, if you believe in such a thing, just might cause disappointment. If you're immediately thinking you can change the way things are today to be something different tomorrow, I think you're going to set a lot of disappointment, okay? But gradually improving, then you start to recognize, these positive changes, right, and outcomes. If you take your time and you make sure you get something solid in place before you move on to the next step, I think it's a much better approach.
That's kind of interesting, Mike. Can I just take you back to one piece that you were talking about, which was the kind of the industry sectors. You made some comment about the company, the industry. What I've come to realize, I've had the luxury of being able to work in various industries in a production operations place. I've worked in nuclear power, I've worked in petrochems. Majority of my career has been spent in oil and gas. And the amount of reliability to be applied, and when you look at it, there is a tendency to go for overkill. And what works for, let's say, a nuclear power generation plant, and the level of reliability, which is also tied into the integrity of the facility, when you compare that amount of reliability and rigor that goes into it, trying to apply that to another industry, let's say oil and gas, where they're different countries as well. They have different regulatory regimes that demand different levels of integrity and reliability as well. Some countries, they have take or pay on their oil and gas pipelines. So if you don't meet the quota for that particular day, you've lost the opportunity to make it up. But if you've got more production facilities, and maybe the maturity of the facility says that you have more facility than you actually have production need, then you can actually get away with less focus on reliability. So comparing nuclear to oil and gas to the airline industry, where planes don't get paid if they're on the ground, you've got to put different levels. And that's one of the problems from an operations perspective or perception, is that whenever you hear reliability, there is always this drive to take it to the nth degree and actually start to make it so that it actually takes away from the risk-reward value that you're looking for. Okay. So I'll share that with you. Your thoughts?
Yeah, no, those are all good points. And one of the things, when you tackle reliability and that's all part of understanding exactly what you can achieve. And one of the things that one of the quotes I really enjoy using is one that Desmond Tutu used. There's only one way to eat an elephant, a bite at a time. And we should recognize how daunting something is, right? We absolutely should, but we should, try eating the elephant at one bite at a time. If more perspective is provided, then we're going to be more positive on the other end. So for sure, considering all that. Moving on to our kind of one of the first things we should discuss here is maturity of the organization. We should assess where we're at and recognize that we can determine what steps we need to start making in order to make our journey successful into reliability. Basically, setting the stages, if you will, to establishing the good. Okay. We talk about, how leadership should embrace this awareness on our maturity of the organization and help us recognize, some of the fundamentals that are needed in order to build on this. The things we have learned from the past experiences is very important, and the current state of our facilities. The term that we always used was worth doing. So it's making sure you do some type of assessment to ensure that you are doing reliability on the right things, that you're making sure that reliability or building a reliability program within your organization, that it is the right time to do so. The second piece is around capacity and capability. And we can just go around this ring here. We talk about, do we have the current resources and people, the equipment? Do we currently have the tools? Are we doing RCMs, RCFAs, FMEAs, that type of stuff? Do we currently have the skill sets and processes? And, facilitating RCMs and FMEAs, there is a certain skill set that is required there. And I've seen it. I've seen guys that are experts on systems facilitate, and they give all the answers away. And that's not an ideal reliability program. It needs to be based on the experiences that the operations, maintenance, and the people at the site have gone through. So that's a very important piece. Do we have a budget to start building a reliability program? And do we have the time? And very importantly, do we have the right leadership in place to ensure we can start building this? And do we have the technology? If we're going to collect information on our equipment, do we have the right systems in place to support us in that area?
So here's a question for you, Mike. Where do you think the ownership for reliability should reside in any organization? Should there, in fact, be a chief reliability officer? We're hearing about chief data officers, chief information officers. We put such a reliance on these kind of things. So why are we not putting that level of visibility that there is a chief reliability officer? Is there such a thing?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. We often equate reliability to be owned by maintenance, right? Those two terms are used all the time: maintenance, reliability and maintenance. But reliability is dependent on everyone to varying degrees. Therefore, everyone owns reliability. And we've seen this on some of our more successful projects where we've integrated other areas that are just even outside of maintenance and reliability. Supply chain. Supply chain can be a huge factor in supporting reliability. So once we integrate that, we need everybody on board with it. So the answer to that is everyone. And then your second question, absolutely. I mean, we have chief financial officers, chief operating officers. And, if an organization prioritizes and emphasizes reliability, then why not have a chief reliability officer? Each of these C-level roles should be leaders in their own area for change, proponents of awareness and value, and assessors of risk, right? So I think it goes back to, I guess, how an organization would prioritize reliability, but a CRO would be a good fit.
Here's another question for you then. Who makes the ideal candidate for a reliability lead, manager, a CRO? Who would be the ideal candidate for that particular role?
Yeah, so in my experiences, I've seen most successes come from those who adhere to the things that I just said around, being proponents of awareness of value and assessors of risk, but also those that have had, that cross-pollination of awareness and experience through other groups. And the reason I say awareness is that you don't always have to be experienced at something, but if you've gotten integrated with another area of your organization to the point where you're collaborating on something, you start to understand their function. And I think if you have that understanding, you're going to make a very good leader in reliability.
So we've had many conversations about this. I'm going to push you a little bit on this. Is it an operations production guy? Is it a reliability maintenance kind of guy? Is it an engineer? Which group makes the right candidate to lead this? Because each one brings a different perspective.
Well, personally, I would probably say the engineering groups. And I say that purely based on the intent of what engineering is there to do. I think about if you look at a plant from conception, right, to keeping it running, I think there's concepts and ideas that are, I mean, it's not all about invention, but it's about what that engineering function really is there to do, and it's to kind of support the health, safety, and production of that plant. I mean, we're all responsible in some degree to that, but we, whether it's putting in redundant equipment to protect our equipment and protect our people, or whether it's some other function, I think it resides in the engineering side. We talked a little bit about prioritization. So prioritization of reliability will ultimately determine how reliability is positioned within your organization. If we prioritize, then we'll find the time. We could say that, right? And then I mentioned earlier, through risk assessment, you'll be able to determine if the timing is right. I'm a big believer in risking everything. Risk rank everything if you're going to make a decision on it. The points that I add to this after here is distraction causes derailment. and it's assuring, timing is right. I mean, that could be, you could determine that through risk. Are there any major projects that could impact our progress? So would you want to start building a reliability organization if you have other things that are happening? Would you want to start a reliability program if your organization is going through a major change, if it's growing or shrinking? So, I mean, to me, risk and prioritization are huge tools in determining our timing and whether it makes sense to do it or not. So the next pieces here we're going to go through it's around perception, and this is kind of fun. This is, in my experience, talking to different operators and talking to different maintenance folk. I've gotten some really interesting feedback, and I'm interesting to see, from the people that are attending today, if you've heard similar feedback, or if you maybe even believe some of these things that are even being said here. So our first piece here is reliability from an operations perspective. When I've talked to operators, these are the kind of comments they've said. They just want equipment to run. They want to maximize production. They want little to no interruptions, and they would like to be kind of in charge of when the equipment can shut down. So they'd like to own the shutdown schedules. And of course, I've heard they want maintenance to do a better job. Continuing on with some more comments here. The equipment should run as much as possible. I've heard this one a lot. I know I can get a lot more out of the equipment if I want to. And I'm going to talk to that a little bit more from basically two perspectives. And then reliability is a cost we do not need. I think I've heard that a lot, only because operations would rather have a brand new, and I'm not trying to assault all you operators out there, but they'd rather have a shiny brand new chair than, break into spending money in reliability in some cases, or a better control panel, or something along those lines. And they would rather see that investment go into there. And then finally, if maintenance knew what they were doing, we would not have any problems. So there's a lot of blame. I've found it in my career, going back and forth. And there's actually been an instance. I'll just jump to the maintenance perspectives here. There's actually been an instance when I had been facilitating at one point in time, and I felt like I was, a referee between the two, and it was very difficult because it was one of the first times that the two groups were brought together in a long time, and there was just a lot of tension in the room. And there was one time it got pretty scary. I thought it was going to come to fisticuffs, but we managed to keep our cool. And I guess it was a learning process for that organization as we started to recognize how important it is for reliability and maintenance to work together. And they started to see that when we started having the conversations through facilitation. So from a maintenance perception, this is kind of what I've heard, is they would like operations to run the equipment properly. They push it way too hard. And then they need more time to perform maintenance. A lot of times they're rushed to do certain jobs, and they feel like they don't do it right. They would like we would like operations to let us do our job is what I've heard. And as of I guess within the last, I want to say 15 years, as information has become more readily available about the equipment, maintenance department would like to get more information from operations on that, so they could drive some of their maintenance programs. And then why can't operations perform some of the basic cares? When I really got into reliability, and I want to talk kind of around 2004-ish, when I was doing most of my work in the forest industry at the time, operators were a big part of the reliability piece. They would take measurements from different gauges. In some cases, they would top up oil in some instances, and they would tighten packing. And those are some things that you just don't even hear about anymore, or it's very rare. And obviously, we have to be careful and make sure that operations in those types of with that type of basic care are trained properly and know what they're doing. But I mean, it's a pretty common piece. There's a lot of collaboration work in there. And Mike's got something that he says whenever I bring up the basic care. And what is that, Mike?
I'll share this with you. On the wall of a North Sea platform in the maintenance supervisor's office, he had a sign on the wall and it says, "Without facts, all we have are opinions. Opinions lead to arguments." And that's the problem that we have here, is we make grandiose statements about what reliability will do without backing it up with the data to prove that we're actually reducing cost, increasing production, and getting that balance, I think.
I want to go back to what that saying you said when I was talking about operations and basic care.
If it moves, grease it. If it doesn't, paint it. And if it doesn't need either, wash it.
Okay. Love it.
That's operations perform maintenance as far as I'm concerned. Okay.
That's right. Excellent. Okay. Oh, and the last one I forgot to say there is that that was the operations one. Reliability and maintenance works for operations. The maintenance guys that I've worked with in the past, this is how they honestly felt, that their job was to work for operations, and a lot of times that is a cultural driver, right? I think that's again a mindset of how an organization operates. Some more perceptions here from maintenance. Some equipment needs to come down in order to preserve it. Well, that's absolutely a case. Operations know things about the equipment that would be helpful. This is something that we started getting smarter and smarter with as reliability experts. And one example I have is I did some RCM in mining, and I did a really big, it was a big track hoe, and the operator would do things like a swing test or drift tests. And what they were is they would swing the boom and then kind of release the controls and see how long it would take for the hydraulic motors to kick in, for it to stop it. So there's some really interesting tests that they were able to do, and they do the same thing on braking and stopping the track hoe. And it's things like that the operators know. So we always think about the five senses and things that they can smell, things that they can see, things that they could touch. I mean, as long as it's safe, that could provide some really good insight into maintenance. And those are the things that we want to hear. If an operator's walking to his control panel and he's feeling a vibration on the floor, that might provide some indication that something's going on, because that vibration's never been felt before. So notify maintenance. So that's kind of what they're saying there. Reliability helps us determine the right work at the right time. And that's what maintenance wants to do. They don't want to be all over. They don't want to be reactive. They want to be organized, know what they're coming to do. Our tool time is being depleted more and more all the time. And it's a lot of it goes back to what I talked about earlier, is the planning and scheduling functions, and this whole concept of doing the right work at the right time. We're just losing touch. We were getting good there for a while, and we're starting to lose it again. And then finally here, operations seems to have no idea what is happening to the equipment. They're too focused on production. So it's kind of a contradiction to what was said earlier, but anyways, it was all perceived, all perception. And then finally, we wanted to bring in shareholders' perception on this. So if you ask a shareholder, they might say operations own and run the plant, and maintenance own the performance and are responsible for all the upkeep. And you could say that shareholders own the company and expect the best results. They're trying to maximize the return on investment. But for this to happen, you need to have a reliable plant, and there must be a common ground around reliability. So you can see that each one of these areas, based on the things that we've read here, are maybe separated to some degree and need to be pulled back together. Okay, so what do we need to do? Well, we need to start to achieve a balance between production and reliability costs. We need to recognize no reliability means greater cost, right? And the key thing for me, one of the things I always like to get a little bit deeper in is that too much reliability or excessive reliability can drain on resources, equating to reduction on dividends, but it also it kind of creates that sour taste on what reliability is there to do. When we used to go in and do heavily resourced RCM assessments, the organization, number one, wasn't happy with the number of resources that we had to draw out of day-to-day operations. That was a huge cost to them. So on the other end of things, they wanted to make sure that they were getting bang for their buck. And unfortunately, if you don't implement properly, if you don't leave time to implement properly, you can't show that. So you go through all this effort, and a lot of times it was wasted. So I guess a final point to this is this, methods like prioritization, using, criticality, can help define, the reliability efforts and point you in the kind of right direction where you need to go. The next thing we're going to talk about here is the culture. So we've talked about idealism, we talked about perception, and now we're getting into culture. So, culture, in my experience, this was something, for most of my career, we didn't even consider organizational culture, like I said. And, Peter Drucker says, culture eats strategy for breakfast. Well, there couldn't be any more truth to that. Our successes in embodying reliability are based, firstly, on understanding our people, and secondly, determining the best fit strategy for change. It's very difficult to go in with new concepts, new ideas, and not keeping everybody kind of in tune to what's going on. It's one of the reasons I think, we had so many areas that weren't successful, is because we tried to force them in, and we were telling people this was a good idea instead of inviting them to be a little bit more collaborative and contribute. I think, like I said, and one of the things, Mike did mention at the top of this is that, we're talking heavily about maintenance and operations here, but this goes way beyond. This goes to other groups. How can we get other areas of the organization to contribute to the successes of reliability? And we need to make that very clear. And that's all goes hand in hand in how we deal with, culture. And just so some of the things that we, need to understand is, do we understand our current culture, right? How is leadership positioned to be successful? Do we understand how change affects the organization? And again, setting expectations on the contributions from each of these areas. Is the organization investing in people? Are they willing to, pay for the training? Are they willing to ensure that all these areas within the organization go through understanding of what reliability is, presentation? Mike knows that that's one of the things that I've always been very clear on, is that before bringing people in to do an FMEA, we need to explain what it is, so that when they come prepared and they're able to bring all the knowledge and all the tools that they have. Do we understand the common organizational objectives? And do we provide recognition at every level? When some area does good, how do we reward them?
Mike, can I, are you good with what you said there? I just want to share some insights and thoughts. So sure. One of my thoughts, as you mentioned, I think we use this at least once a month, if not more frequently. Culture eats strategy for breakfast. It's a theme that runs through all of our practices. The amazing thing is that phrase came from Peter Drucker in March of 2000. And we're 21 years later, and we still find out that the majority of projects fail. There's only around about 19% of any change initiatives that actually are effectively successful. The majority limp along for years until they're changed again, or some fail outright and never ever are successful. So when you look at it that way, a reliability function needs to really consider that culture. And I beg the question, If you were to test the pulse of your organizations and ask them how effectively they are at setting goals and matching them to the culture within the organization, I think you'd find that the majority would say we don't. We get it from up on high, it's driven down, and we're not even asked how we think it should work. And I think that's one of the big failings when you come for reliability, is you don't actually engage the workforce and ask them the right questions in the first place of how can we do this? Okay, and how much reliability should we apply?
Good point. Good point. Okay, this leads us into our kind of last area that we wanted to talk about, and it's the approach.
Right, just a thought from one of the attendees.
Yes.
Tina says, I think they need to define their destination, and solo travel is risky. Okay, so agreed.
Yes.
You can't do any of this. I actually got accused of it in my younger years, of being the type of leader who was at the top of the mountain because he knew how to get there. And when he turned around, everybody else was still at base camp. You've got to recognize that if you're going to be successful at these things, you've got to bring people along with you. Okay.
Yes. And I think that's a really good lead into what we're going to be talking about here, Tina.
Yeah. Thank you, Tina.
So with approach, we can ask some questions just to get a more deeper understanding of where your organization is at, where your people are at. Does everyone within the organization understand why the organization is in business? Could you answer that? Could people actually answer that? For me, that's really important, because I think, in the end, when we show up for work, we should be working to support why this organization is in business. That should be our main support mechanism. Does each level within the organization align to this understanding? Well, that's first of all, if they know what it is. Hopefully they do. And if they don't, how are they able to align to it? And then thirdly, does each level tend to lean towards independent objectives? And I've got so many examples of this. And, everybody I think that's online here has heard the term silos before. And I've worked in so many organizations that they've created these silos. One of them was a supply chain management group that reported to the CFO, and that CFO, of course, they're counting pennies, and they wanted to make sure that the supply chain did the same thing. And the initiative to support, the maintenance and operations function was immediate loss, because it was all about, saving money and not supporting these groups. So, when these questions are asked, you have to consider when this question is asked, not many people can answer unless their organization has made it very clear, right? Each cell will tend to function independent if alignment and understanding of the organization objectives are not in place. And, the third point is again, the risk of silos being created. And instead of working for the common good or for the organizational good, they're working independently. And that can be very dangerous.
I'd just like to say, where you see that, people will not change out of their normal operating operational modi, unless there is a consequence for continuing in that frame of mind. You actually have to create a compelling reason for change. And if you can't do that, then you will not achieve the objectives that you want to do.
Exactly. Okay, so how do we balance the scale? Well, we need to determine the boundaries and set them. We want people within the organization to know what the objectives are, because they have been made very, very clear, right? We want synergy to produce a combined effect towards reliability that is greater than the sum of their separate effects towards reliability, I suppose, even if they are even towards reliability. And we don't want segregation or silos. We need to pull the organization together, as you see here, so that we have kind of a unified objective. And that little bit right there is important. And I think, once we understand what that green triangle is, and how it needs to function, we're going to be a lot better off. It's the sweet spot. So how do we so once we've understood the ideologies, the different perceptions that exist out there, and the culture, we're now set, I think, to start building a playbook, designing a way to start bringing in reliability. It's similar to any sporting team. They are successful because they strategize and they plan and they make sure that they have certain ways to achieve certain goals. Okay. And this can be done, and the playbook should include, a defined and unified objective, and make sure we understand what success looks like. If we go back to the beginning where we talked about perfection, we talked about good. I think, setting those stepping stones of good is a good start, but we need to make sure we define those up front. And we certainly have to measure these successes and make the organization aware that when we've hit those targets, that we're doing a good job. And what that does is it entices people and then gets people more eager to do more and want to do more. Clearly define the roles and accountabilities that exist within the organization. Start developing process and procedures in order to instill alignment. Make sure we reward and promote, and of course, empower through leadership. I think, we're really big on process and making sure that we can guide people, making sure that even, involve people in developing these processes. It's not always the best idea to develop a process, throw it out there and say, here's my process, use it. But go out and determine what that process needs to look like by working with the different levels of the organization to bring them together and go after that unified objective. Is there anything you wanted to add to that, Mike?
I think one of the big things that always gets lost is there is initial success and people cheer it, but then after that, it tends to become, yeah, that's what we expect. You need to keep celebrating the successes. That's what you need to do. Every opportunity, if you want to change culture, you've got to reward and recognize contribution. And then if you really believe in a reliability culture and you see the value that starts to be accrued from that, you've got to keep rewarding and recognizing people for that. Okay.
Absolutely. I'd like to thank everybody for attending today. This presentation obviously is going to be posted on our YouTube channel, so you can view it again or share it to other people. There will be other webinars coming out from Helios. We usually do one a month, so look out for those. Follow us on social media. Check out our website. And if you have any questions, please do not hesitate to reach out.